Hello, family. Welcome back. What a Christ family and friends. It's great to have you with us. We're on the second part of this two-part mini-series that we are calling Defining Life. Last week, we took a close look at understanding what the scripture means when it refers to flesh or living by the flesh. And this week, we look at what it is to be led by the Spirit or to walk in the Spirit. It's awesome. So stay with us at the end of this. We're going to leave you some recap points, connect this a little bit to last week, and we'll bring this together for you. So welcome with me, Masood, as we dive into this. I hope you have your Bibles ready. I hope you have your mind ready, and I hope you have your heart ready. God bless you, family, and we'll see you on the other side.
Hello, family, and welcome back to the book of Galatians. So happy to be back with you, looking at a couple of other things in the book of Galatians. So far, we have gone through all that Paul has been telling us concerning law, grace, being a son, being a slave, the truth, and everything related to those stuff. But eventually, at the end of this book, Paul brings his message to what really matters, and it's two ways of living that obviously everything that we have learned so far are making it to happen. Two ways of living, and those are called the spirit and the flesh. All right. Now, if you look at chapter 5 and chapter 6 of Galatians, what you're going to see is that this is where Paul uses these two terms, spirit and flesh, quite often. And the reason for that is because he's step by step showing us certain things about spirit and the flesh. Now, you're going to be be hearing today, and you have been, in fact, reading that already, that there are things about living in the Spirit, walking in the Spirit, being led by the Spirit, sowing in the Spirit, reaping from the Spirit, and bearing the fruit of the Spirit. Okay, so these are all mentioned in chapter 5 and 6. Now, we're going to be looking at all of these. These are all related, but eventually I want to show you something about, toward the end, that this is all about being led by the Spirit. Okay, because this is like how if you are born in the US, then that's where you are, that's where you live. Likewise, when you're born in the Spirit, that's where you are, that's where you live. So you're living in the Spirit. But then Paul says, if we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. So that's like, okay, you were born in the United States. Okay, that's great. But then you're living in that place. That's great. But the next thing is how you manifest in that country, who you are in that country, what you do in that country. We call it walking. Okay, walking in the United States. So likewise, if I'm born in the Spirit and I'm living in the Spirit, then it's about being walking in the Spirit. So Paul tells us in verse 25 of chapter 5, if we live in the Spirit, let us also walk in the Spirit. Okay, so therefore, now we're moving toward walking this thing out. In fact, if you look at the word walk in the Greek, it means how you conduct yourself, a manner of life, a manner of living. Now, as I mentioned, chapter 5 and 6 of the book of Galatians is all about spirit and flesh. So I'm going to be reading a couple of these. I'm going to put them on the screen. You can follow with me, and then we get to the message. Look at verse 16 of chapter 5. He says, I say then, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. So I'm going to put this on the screen. So number 1, walk in the Spirit versus lust of flesh. Okay, now let's look at verse 19. Now, the works of the flesh are evident, which are adultery, fornication, uncleanness, so on and so forth. So what do we have here? Number 2, we have works. Works, and I'm gonna put it on the other side here. Works of flesh. Now look at verse 22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, and the rest. So what do we have here? We have the fruit of Spirit. Okay, so far you're saying that we have walking in the Spirit versus lust of the flesh. Then we have the fruit of the Spirit versus works of the flesh. But look at chapter 6 now. Verse 7, do not be deceived, God is not mocked, for whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. For verse 8, for he who sows to his flesh will of the flesh reap corruption. Okay, so now we have sowing in, I'm going to put it here, sowing in flesh. And then he said he will reap from flesh. Okay, and if we continue, but he who sows to the Spirit, so sows in or to, so I'm going to change this to, he who sows to the Spirit then we read that will of the Spirit reap everlasting life. So he will reap from Spirit. By the way, he calls this reaping from the flesh corruption, and this reaping from Spirit everlasting life. All right, so, and we have one more term in verse 18. He says, but if you are led by the Spirit. Okay, that's another one, led by Spirit. You're not under the law. So the other one would be under the law. Okay, so let's look at this. You're talking about walking in Spirit, and then we have walk of the flesh, which would be lust. Then we have the fruits of the Spirit versus works of the flesh. Then sowing to the Spirit and sowing to the flesh, reaping from the Spirit and reaping from the flesh. And now we are being led by the Spirit or being under the law. Okay, so those are basically the differentiation that we see Paul is laying out for us, so we can see that, okay, everything that is on the left of this screen is about the Spirit. Everything on the left is about the Spirit. Everything on the right is about the flesh. So under the flesh, you see lusts, works, sowing and reaping of the flesh, which brings corruption, and also living under the law. Now, here's my point. In verse 18, he says, but if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. I'm going to add, you won't be having the lust of the flesh, and you won't produce the works of the flesh. So the issue is not really not to have the lust of the flesh. The issue is not really not to have the works of the flesh. The issue is not to not sow or reap from the flesh. The issue is the other one. The issue is to walk in the Spirit. The issue is to bear the fruit of the Spirit. The issue is to sow to the Spirit, to bear, to reap from the Spirit. The issue is to be led by the Spirit. Okay, that's my message for today. being led by the Spirit. Okay, because eventually, looking at this analogy once again, that if you're born in a place, the very next thing that happens is that you would automatically be living in that place. But then how you walk, how you conduct yourself in that environment, in that city, in that nation, in that country, is up to you. You may be living in the Spirit, but how you walk is a different story. You may be living in the United States, but how you walk in the United States is a different story. How you see your citizenship, how you respect it, how you deal with other citizens, how you come to understand about your right of citizenship in that country, those are all dependent on you. All right. So likewise, we are having a living in the Spirit and then walking in the Spirit. But then Paul tells us, in order to walk in the Spirit, you need to actually be led by the Spirit. Okay, so I'm going to put this on the screen quickly. So therefore, okay, so we have these three. Okay, so we have you live in the Spirit, and then you begin to be led by the Spirit, and then you would walk in the Spirit. Okay, each is followed but then by the next. So you live in the Spirit, then you are being led by the Spirit, and then because of that, you walk in the Spirit. Okay, now the question is, where am I? What am I doing right now? What stage of this chain am I right now in? Okay, so it's obvious that you were born of the Spirit, that you are in the Spirit. And it's because, you're just born of the Spirit. If you're born of the Spirit, you are in the Spirit. So now the next thing that comes right after that is the leading of the Spirit. To the degree that you are being led by the Spirit, you walk that out. Okay, because walking, again, it just means how you conduct yourself, how basically you deal with your manner of life, how you manifest, how that which you know about you manifests itself. Okay, that's a walking. So therefore, it's now about being led by the Spirit. But what is this being led by the Spirit? What does it mean to be led by the Spirit? How are you being led by the Spirit? I think those are the questions that we should be asking, because if he says, if you are being led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Therefore, it becomes very important for me, because I don't want to be under the law. You don't want to be under the law. So then what is that first statement, first part of this statement about being led by the Spirit? In order to find this out, we're going to be looking at another epistle from Paul, and it's the book of Romans. We're going to see what he says actually in this book, and I think this would be amazing. Look at chapter 8, verse 12. Therefore, brethren, we are not debtors to the law, to the flesh, to live according to the flesh. For if we live according to the flesh, if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, these are sons of God. Okay, so look at what we had here. So we had this leading of the Spirit. So he says, as many as are led by the Spirit. This was from Galatians, but now we're finding it in Romans. He says, these are sons of God. Okay, as many as are led by the Spirit, these are sons of God. But what comes after this is very important. Look at verse 15. For you did not receive the spirit of... Okay, wait a minute here. We just read, as many as are led by the Spirit, these are sons of God. But then he qualifies what spirit you are being led by. Okay, because one verse comes after the other, and the Spirit of God is always like this, that there is a message that is progressively being revealed. So if a verse speaks of a spirit, and then the next verse qualifies that spirit by saying spirit of something, that means that spirit that you were led by is this spirit in the next verse. So once again, let's read. So he says, for you did not receive the spirit of bondage. This is the spirit that you did not receive. So you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you received, this is the spirit of adoption. Okay, you received the spirit of adoption. The spirit of adoption, as we have looked at this before, is the spirit of sonship. It's the spirit that places you as a son, a spirit that declares you to be a son, the spirit that says the days of childhood is over, now you are my son. And because of that, you are basically the mature son of the house, and the father trusts you enough to give all his authority to you. So you become a representative of him. You represent him. So the son becomes the manifestation of the father. All right. So how can you manifest God? I'm going to say it in different wording. Look at God and how big he is, how amazing he is, how wonderful he is, how powerful he is. How can I represent him if the same exact qualities are not found in me? It's impossible. I cannot be a manifestation of my Father. I cannot stand in front of people and say, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, if all those qualities that are in my Father are not found in me. And the Father cannot expect me to be any of those things if those things are not available, they're not accessible, they're not implanted in me. All right? So now this is the thing. Okay, if that's true, if that's who he is and that's who I am, in general, we're coming to this understanding. Okay, I'm the son of the Father. Then how is this going to manifest? Well, this is that which I showed you. There are 3 stages to this. There was a living, now there is being led and walk it out, being led by the Spirit. That's how it happens. But what does Romans 8 have to say about this leading after this? We're going to read one more verse and you'll see. So once again, verse 14 said, as many as are led by the Spirit of God, okay, these are sons of God. But look at verse 16, the Spirit himself, okay, so this is the same Spirit once again. This is once again the same Spirit that you are being led by. And it says, the Spirit himself, ready? Bears witness with our witness. Okay, I need to put this on the screen. So, Spirit and then our spirit. Okay, because there are 2 obviously here that are mentioned. The Spirit bears witness with our spirit. So what comes between the two is this term, bears witness. So this is the spirit that bears witness to us. This stage, this is where, by the way, and the spirit is the one who makes us led or leads us. Okay, so therefore, being led by the spirit is when the bearing witness of the spirit to you happens. Or let me say it in these words: the spirit leads you by bearing witness to you. Let me say it again: the Spirit of God leads you to walk in this way. He bears witness to your spirit. That means there is a testimony that God wants to testify of, that there is a witness that God wants to witness of, to bear witness of. And he says that's been given to the Spirit to do it. And the Spirit bears witness to our spirit. And he says this is that bearing witness of. And he says, once again in verse 16, that we are children of God. Okay, so he says this bearing witness is that we are, not we shall be, we are children of God. Okay, this is that bearing witness. You didn't see that. Okay, I'm just switch to my screen. So the Spirit bears witness to us that we are children of God. This is the leading of the Spirit. The leading of the Spirit is to bear witness to you. So how are you being led by the Spirit? By a spirit bearing witness to your spirit. By the Spirit talking to you about the things of your identity, of who you are. So how are you going to walk in the Spirit? By being led by the Spirit. What does being led by the Spirit mean? It simply means to receive a word from God, from the Spirit, to hear from the Spirit. Therefore, all of this said, that brings us to us that for me to walk in the Spirit, I need to hear the Spirit. It's the Spirit that speaks to me, and it's me that hears what the Spirit says. And because of that, I walk in the Spirit naturally. Just as in the past, it was the flesh that would speak to me, and I would hear what the flesh says, and then I would walk in the flesh. So one would bear the fruit of the Spirit, one would bear the fruit of the works of the flesh. So because I talked to you about, in fact, the sowing to the Spirit and sowing to the flesh, well, how do you sow to the Spirit? When the Spirit that is bearing witness, and that bearing witness is in a form of a word, your spirit receives it and plants it in your heart. And that, when it begins to grow, that means it comes to an understanding, and you understand it, then that's where you are bearing the fruit of it, which is joy, peace, love, and all those things. So it's what God speaks, the knowledge of God, of me, of you, about us, that we didn't know, but now He's speaking to us, and it's like a bearing witness. It's like what Jesus said, the Holy Spirit would come and do. He would bear witness of Him. Who is He? He's the Son. He would bear witness of the Son of God. Now, why is that important? Because Romans chapter 8, verse 16 says that the Spirit Himself bears witness with us that we are children of God, and if children, then heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ. So when Jesus said, I'm the Son of God, and the Spirit would come and he would bear witness of me, it's because you don't know that you are joint heir with me, but he's going to be bearing witness to you. How? By taking what is of mine and declare it to you, make it known to you. Now, what does that mean? That, okay, all that you need to know is Jesus. The moment you begin to know him, you find yourself in him, because that's his message, that you and I are one, isn't it? Isn't that all that he tried to show us and to teach us by telling all those things to his disciples in the Last Supper? That's exactly what was happening. Now, if you look at the book of John, there are instances that actually this term bearing witness is being used. It's actually, I think, above 30 times. Witness or testify or bearing witness, these are all the same. But look at a few things that are very important. Look at John chapter 3, verse 31. He who comes from above is above all. He who is of the earth is earthly and speaks of the earth. He who comes from heaven is above all. And what he has seen and heard, that he testifies, and no one receives his testimony. Okay, he says, the one who came down from above is not like us. He's not dusty. He's not man of the earth. He's heavenly. He knows stuff from his realm, the realm of the spirit. Now, we don't know. How are we going to know? By him bearing witness to us. But he says what he's bearing witness to us is called a testimony, and no one is receiving his testimony. Now, what's the context of John chapter 3? Well, it's the story of Nicodemus going to Jesus saying, how are you doing all these stuff, these miracles? And Jesus begins to show him that all of this is because of the Spirit. Because that's where he says, he who is born of the Spirit, if you are born from above, unless you are born from above, unless you're born from the Spirit. He constantly uses that language to tell Nicodemus, it's not by flesh, it's not the works of the flesh, it's not who I am because of my natural heritage, it's not because of my forefathers or my parents, it's none of that. It's not because even I have kept the law. He says, it's just a birth. It's just a birth. It's just who you are because of your birth. If you're born a cat, you are a cat. If you're born a parrot, you are a parrot. If you're born a human being, you are a human being. If you're born a child of God, you are a child of God. So now he says, you don't know this. I'm bearing witness of this truth. That means this is a truth. But yet you don't receive my testimony. In fact, look at chapter 3, verse 11. He says, most assuredly, I say to you, we speak of what we know and testify of what we have seen, and you do not receive our witness, our testimony. Okay, so remember, you're being led by the Spirit by listening to what he bears witness of. So before there was a Spirit given to us, there was Jesus, and Jesus was filled with the Spirit. So he is speaking, we speak to you of things that are heavenly, things that you have not seen, you have not heard, but I do know those things. So how are you going to know them? By listening to me. That's why we emphasize on Jesus and Jesus alone. And that means Jesus alone is superior to anything ever written, anything ever preached from pulpit, anything ever taught in the church, any belief, any reasoning, any imagination, anything about, well, God is like this, or God does this, or what God allowed that because of this. Now, all of those things, if they're not found in Jesus, once again, I don't know how many times you have heard this from me and Rose, but if you don't find it in Jesus, it's not the truth, period. I don't care how wise that seems to be. I don't care how reasonable that sounds. that argument that we are making, if it's not found in the life of Jesus, it's just human weakness trying to justify weakness. It's just human wisdom trying to bring God to his own level because he can't imagine anything bigger than this. And yet Jesus constantly says, come up here, which means let me show you, set your mind on things above where Christ is. There are things that you can't know if you're not allowing your mind to be raised. Okay, and how is your mind being raised? Well, look at Revelation chapter 4. It says there was a voice in heaven said, come up here. So again, it's that hearing, that voice, that bearing witness that calls you up. It's like you being in the ashes and he lifts you up and puts you on the throne of glory. Read 1 Samuel chapter 2, the story of Hannah. So because God's story is different than human beings. It's not like us trying to go through some certain formulas to do this. He's God, he's the Spirit, and he says that Spirit has the power of creation in the beginning, has the power of resurrection 2,000 years ago, and he lives inside of us. Now he's speaking from within to us, and the things that he's bearing witness of is who we are. It's that basically truth about our being. And when you begin to hear that, when you begin to give yourself to that, well, what's going to happen is you're going to be walking that out. So you started with living in the Spirit, then you began to be led by the Spirit, and as you're being led by the Spirit, you walk in the Spirit. Okay, and because of that, what's going to happen? The fruit of the Spirit would be manifest in you. That's how God designed mankind to be. That's the life of the tree of life. You're one with the Lord, which is a spirit. You are the branch of the same tree. You and the Father are one. And because of that, who he is also manifests through you. That's the story of the tree of life. And I think all of that is in the book of John. But anyways, back to the book of Galatians, and my time is over. Back to the book of Galatians, Paul is basically drawing a very sharp and clear line between the spirit and flesh. And he shows us that everything that is on the side of the spirit, these are about the spirit speaking, the spirit talking, speaking things that are not of the nature of the law or the keeping of the law or the works of the law. These are not about you being slave, you being in fear. These are about really the story of God's grace, God's love that produces in you faith. This is the walk of the Spirit, listening to Him bearing witness to you, allowing those words to be planted in you, in your heart, and that which is sown by the Spirit also would manifest the fruit of the Spirit. So that's the way of being led by the Spirit. Please pay attention to this. The Spirit of God constantly bears witness, and there is only one thing that He bears witness of, that you are a child of God. And if you are a child, then an heir of God and joint heir with Christ. If there is any lack in our these realities in our life, is not on the side that God does not speak. It's on the side of us that we at times don't listen to what He's saying. It's like He's giving the good news, but because we are not present with Him, we don't hear them. And if you don't hear the Spirit, guess what is going to be speaking to you? Flesh. And what's going to be manifesting? Works of the flesh. And what is that? Living from a life of lack. That causes man to try to gain things now by his own strength. And the fruit of that is not rest, it's works. And it's not what we are designed for. Anyways, I hope this blessed you, and you're almost wrapping this up, maybe another 1 or 2 sessions, but then the study of the book of Galatians would end. It's been a blessing to me personally just to go through the whole book once again, but I hope it's been a blessing to you. But anyways, there is still 1 or 2 more sessions, and I'm going to see you next week.
Welcome back, family. Thank you, Masood, for bringing us this teaching and connecting this reality for us of what it is to be led by the Spirit and what it is to walk in the Spirit. It is so good. So we're going to dive right into this and look at some recap points to connect these messages together and to really bring this home. The first point for us is this, is that the goal is not to remedy the works of the flesh, but rather the goal is to be led by the Spirit so that you can walk in the Spirit. And so, the issue for us believers is not, how do I deal with the lust of the flesh, with all its sorrows and the desires, and how do I suppress that? That's not it. Rather, it's to live from a different place. Galatians 5:16 and 18 says this. It says, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. And verse 18 says, if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. See, this is not an issue of willpower or morality or how do I control the evil within me. Rather, this is an issue of which tree do you live by? Look, I want you to hear me. You can't change the fruit without changing the tree. That's so important. Let me say that again. You can't change the fruit without changing the tree. If you live from the flesh, all your outcomes will be from that source. It produces works, the works of the flesh. But if you are led by the Spirit, you will walk in the Spirit, and your outcomes will be from that source. So instead of works, you'll produce the fruit of the Spirit, which of course we read is love, joy, peace, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-controls, all those things that we long for. And so the goal is not to just remedy the works of the flesh, but rather the goal is to be led by the Spirit so that you can walk in the Spirit. The second point is this, is walking in the Spirit is a term for how you carry out life. Okay, so walking in the Spirit doesn't mean, to close your eyes and to walk around bumping into things. Walking in the Spirit does not mean to be strange or to be weird. It does not mean to live in a bubble. Walking denotes action, and it means progress. It refers to how you move forward in life. So we'll show you the definition of how this word walking is used in Scripture in the original text here on the screen. You'll see it displayed. See, I love how the use of walking refers to how you make use of opportunities. It's how you regulate your life, how you conduct, how you orchestrate your life. So the thing to note here is when we see this term walking in the Spirit, it is the term for how you carry out your life. The third point is this, is that the Spirit of God is a spirit of sonship. We read this in Galatians 8:14 and 15. It says, for as many as are led by the Spirit of God, these are the sons of God. For you did not receive the spirit of bondage, but you received the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. The thing I want to point out to you here is that the reference here is to sons, which are mature, meaning those that are capable of taking an inheritance. So the Spirit that we receive, the Spirit that lives in us, the Spirit that leads us, is the one that draws us in as sons. It compels our souls to believe in a loving Father by whom we cry out, Father. And, when you feel distant, when you feel disconnected, in a place of fear, in a place of uncertainty, that is not the Spirit of God. The Spirit of God does not scare us away, does not push us away. The Spirit of God draws us in to sonship. And so that's the thing. That's awesome. The fourth point is this, is that the leading of the Spirit is to bear witness to us of sonship. So Romans 8:16 says, the Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And so we saw this here, that the Spirit of God leads us by bearing witness to us of our identity. That's how the Spirit of God guides us. The essence of God, it corroborates that we are indeed the sons of God. The Spirit of God confirms, it provides evidence to us that we are sons, that we are heirs of God. That is what the voice of God in us is showing us. We are led by our identity. We are drawn to this truth. It compels us to what has always been on the heart of the Father, which is to have us as sons. You see, the leading of the Spirit of God directs us. It guides us to the Father, and it places you and I right in the middle of sonship. That is what the Spirit of God is constantly speaking to us. All right, family, my fifth and final point is this. It said we are led by the Spirit, which causes us to walk in the Spirit, which causes us to produce the fruits of the Spirit. And this is that diagram that Masood showed us on the screen. So let's connect everything that we've unpacked here. We looked at how walking in the Spirit refers to how we carry out our life, how we make use of opportunities, how we regulate our life, or how we orchestrate our life. And being led in the Spirit is not this weird thing, but it's the Spirit of God, providing evidence to us that indeed we are the sons of God. So what does this mean that we regulate our life, we carry out our life under the full persuasion that we are the sons, the heirs of God? It's through that lens that we make use of opportunity. It's through that conviction that we conduct ourselves. That is walking in the Spirit, progressing through life under the evidence that we are the sons of God. And when we do, we see the fruits of the Spirit, everything that we've talked about: love, joy, peace, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Okay, family, that wraps it up for us this week. I hope you were blessed by understanding this principle of what it is to be led and what it is to walk in the Spirit. And both of these teachings, last week and this, really connect and help us determine how we define life. I was going to tag this on to the end of this video, but it's long as it is. And so I'm going to actually do this in a separate video and talking about this, where we bring together last week and this week in the importance, how we recognize and determine how we define life. So look for that short video that'll be released separately in the coming days as well. All right, family, we love you. Have a blessed week. Next week is our last week on the book of Galatians, and we can't wait to wrap this up, and we can't wait to finish this out in its fullness and bring this together with the book of Galatians. We hope this blessed you. Don't forget, like our video and subscribe to our channel. That indicates to us that you're enjoying this and that you're tracking with us and that you're part of our community, which we so appreciate. God bless you, family, and we'll see you next week.